So I think we'll begin. We had expected a few more people, but we'll see if they come in later. And like I say, we're recording, so it's not a big deal. So my name is Sarah Shaughnessy, and my co-presenter today is Katie Kyler. We both work in the Open Publishing and Digitization Services unit at the University of Alberta Library, and today we are here to talk about AI and publishing. But before we begin, I just want to acknowledge that we work at the University of Alberta. It's on the Treaty 6 territory, which is the traditional territory of the Cree, Blackfoot, Métis, Nakota Sioux, Iroquois, Dene, and Ojibwe, Saulteaux, and Anishinaabe nations. So today is not only the summer solstice, but it is the National Indigenous Peoples Day. So I wanted to be sure to mention that. I also want to acknowledge, kind of before we get into the presentation, that of course we've already been using AI tools in scholarly publishing for years. We use it in our grammar editing tools, statistical analysis software. What's been changing is that this advent of large language models and the capacity to generate fluent text that's very hard to distinguish from human writing. So this has a lot of implications on the concept of authorship and research integrity. So today, oh, you can change the slide, Katie, thank you. This is our agenda for today. We're going to talk about some of the issues that you might encounter with the use of AI with your article submissions, and share some of the changes that journals are making to their policies in consequence. So we're starting to see this happen, and I'm going to show you some examples. Katie will then take us through a few AI tools that are being used in scholarly publishing, and then if you can hold your questions to the end, we should have time for questions then. Feel free to put things in the chat as we go, but we'll just try to kind of get through the content, and then we can have a bit of a discussion. You can change the slide. Yeah, so AI is a very broad topic, and issues in AI is, yeah, like I had a friend who worked on systematic reviews and mentioned that that they did a review with the concept of AI and how difficult it was to kind of pin down all the words we use to describe AI comprehensively, that there's a lot of ways that we talk about this. What we're going to be talking about really, and I guess you can change the slide, Katie. In this presentation, we're really focusing on natural language processing, which is a branch of AI that's concerned with giving computers the ability to understand text and spoken word like humans as they use it. So this is used in concept analysis, text mining, working with large textual data sets, and it's used in the technology behind chatbots. And then within that structure, there's sort of a smaller subset of things called large language models. And so if you've heard of OpenAI's ChatGPT, I'm sure you have. Other examples are Llama from Meta, or Palm 2 from Google. And so these are large scale language models. So they're large scale in the sense that they're trained on large quantities of unlabeled text using self-supervised or semi-supervised learning. And they are computerized language models that have an artificial neural network with billions of parameters. So what they can do is actually produce, as I'm sure you've seen, like some really impressive text. So researchers are using these tools to help them organize their thinking, to generate feedback on their work, to assist with writing code, and summarizing research literature as well. You can change the slide, Katie. So these tools create fluent text in response to human prompts, but it's important to kind of keep in mind that they're not perceiving or having cognition in any, like, although it replicates often like what a conversation could be like with a person, or it seems like it's part of a creative act, but what it is it's just using prompts and linguistic rules in the corpus sample that they use. So oops, Katie, sorry. Yeah, that's good. You got it. As Husseini, Rasmussen, and Resnick wrote, they do not know the meaning or truth value of the text they receive, process, and generate. Their function is simply to generate understandable, i.e. grammatically correct, and appropriate, i.e. highly probable text outputs in response to text inputs. So we know that these text outputs can be incorrect or irrelevant to the user's prompts, and they're also known to produce what's called hallucinations. So that's something that's apparently confident but wrong response. And one example that I'm familiar with in the library world is that ChatGPT can and does generate citations on a topic that can sound very plausible, perhaps include existing journals or existing academic authors for papers that were never written. So if we get an interlibrary loan request that doesn't seem to exist, it's possible nowadays that it doesn't exist and it was created by ChatGPT. Oh, you can change the slide. Thank you. So what we're seeing, most of the concerns that are expressed around the use of these tools in scholarly publishing has to do with transparency and research integrity. So these large language models generate text, but they don't do it proactively or without prompting. And because their answers are based on content and queries that are used to train the system, the bias that's inherent in the content and queries is reflected in the outputs. And the problem is that natural language processors can't be held responsible for errors in the accuracy of what's written. So this has been sort of the cause for a pushback by publishers against the inclusion of a chatbot as a byline author. And when I was preparing for this presentation, I came across a report by the federal government in 2021 called A Consultation on the Modern Copyright Framework for Artificial Intelligence and the Internet of Things. And it mentioned the Copyright Act does not explicitly define the term author or whether an AI application can be an author of a work. However, Canadian copyright jurisprudence suggests that an author must be a natural person who exercises skill and judgment in creating work, reflective of the fact that the Act ties the term of protection to the life and death of an author. So these text generation tools, they pose a kind of a threat or a challenge to our concept of originality and the intellectual contribution of an author. So we're starting to see a number of journals insisting on the transparency of AI use. And you can switch slides, Katie. And this is a quote from like an editorial in Nature, and this segues nicely into the next part, which is discussion of policy changes. So researchers should ask themselves how the transparency and trustworthiness that the process of generating knowledge relies on can be maintained if they or their colleagues use software that works in a fundamentally opaque manner. So that's one of the concerns that we've seen. And you can change, Katie. Oh, right. So this is, sorry, I forgot about the slide. So this is some further reading if you're interested in kind of where I got these ideas for this first part of the slides. Okay, we can go to the next part. So policy changes, what are we seeing in terms of the changes made to journal publishing policies in light of these concerns? So we've got a few examples to kind of guide you through some of the thinking that's happened. The first example is from Nature. As we saw in the quote, they had a concern about transparency and trustworthiness. And in this policy, Springer Nature Journals says they do not accept large language models as authors, and they require use of large language models to be documented in the methods section or elsewhere. And although we didn't touch on this yet, or I don't think we're going to really get into it today in the presentation, they also have a policy restricting the use of generative AI images and videos. Next slide. So the Journal of the American Medical Association Network also stipulates non-human entities do not respond to their criteria for authorship. And again, here the concern seems to be having a person identifiable to take responsibility for the content, and then clarifying the need to clarify the AI use in either the methods, or here they say, or the acknowledgement section. And they go on to, it's not included in the screenshot, but go on to discourage the use of AI images unless part of a formal research design or methods, and unless this use is clearly described and the author takes responsibility for it. And then our last example, Katie, is a journal called Accountability in Research. And so this one says that the use of AI must be disclosed and the author must take full responsibility for the accuracy, reasoning, and originality. But it goes further to say that authors might use AI for writing the text or for generating ideas used in the text, which is a bit farther than other people have taken it or acknowledged, and that either of these uses must be disclosed. It's also more specific about how the disclosure be made and what's to be included in the supplementary material. So they really outline kind of like how to capture and make that disclosure. And I think you can go to the next slide. Yeah, so some of the things that you might think about for your own journal is sort of like defining authorship and perhaps specifying whether or not natural language processing tools or generative AI can be authors. Who's responsible for the intellectual content? Is that important? And how should AI use be disclosed for authors? And I believe that is all that I have, and Katie can. Oh no, wait, there's one more. Yes, that's right. So this, I just wanted to point this out to you all because it might be something you could take back to your copy editors. So that if people are citing generative AI in their works, the University of Alberta Library added this section to the guide. So we have highlighted how this can be done in APA, Chicago, and MLA styles. So that's a tool for you. And Katie will have a more positive take now because I've been talking about all the kind of downside of AI, but Katie will tell us about some of the cool things we can do.
We'll see how positive. No, just kidding. Thanks, Sarah. So yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of just showcasing some of the tools, and then hopefully we'll have some time for questions and to kind of have some discussion about using these tools and responding to the use of these tools. So, okay. So the first thing, in case, just to make sure we're all on the same page in case people haven't used it or aren't familiar, I wanted to talk specifically about ChatGPT because that's been the platform that's been getting a lot of press and use lately. So essentially, ChatGPT is an AI chatbot. You ask it a question and then it generates text, like how Sarah was talking about before. And what it draws upon is content just like openly on the internet. It draws upon Wikipedia, Google Books, some coding tutorials, and a repository called Common Crawl that is a repository of web crawl data. So how would you use a tool like this? So you have to create an account. You just ask it a question, and then it will give you an answer. So there is a lot of reasons to be concerned about a tool like this, but there is also some ways that a tool like this can be useful and in an ethical way. So some of the most common uses that I've heard of and that I've seen, you know, for journals and for things like that is for, generating copy for sort of predictive text like announcements or events or things like that. I've also heard of, press releases, heard of people using it to generate recipes because it will, scrape the web and it'll take out all of the ads in that person's life story and just compile all the very similar recipes and give you just the recipes. So there's definitely a lot of uses. And if you're not familiar, I just wanted to do a quick demo of what this looks like. So I have created an account and I'm going to ask a question. You can see I tested this yesterday, but if I say, create a call for submissions for a scholarly journal, this is the type of thing that it will create. So it's essentially scraping all of the sources that it has kind of in its corpus, and then it's generating the most likely content. So you can see how this could be useful for something where it's just like that original copy that you start with, that you can start from sort of editing from. But essentially that is how ChatGPT works. You just ask it a question and then it creates the most obvious response. So let's talk about a couple other tools. So some tools that you may already be familiar with are already using AI, like in all of our, Gmail, you've probably seen it suggesting the rest of your sentence, that kind of stuff. That is generative AI. Something like Grammarly is also generative AI writing assistance. A couple things that are very specific to the scholarly publishing world that I wanted to point out. Um, I'll just go through them here. But before I start, I do want to say this is not a comprehensive list, and I am not endorsing the use of these things, but these are the things that we are aware that people are using, and that we think it's good to kind of showcase how AI is being used in scholarly publishing. So this first one, Penelope.ai, this is automated article reviews. The way this works is journals or publishers, they'll sign up to a service like this, and then they have sort of like a template of parameters that you can go through and select. And then when a journal article is submitted, it automatically goes through that and then puts out a review pretty instantly of, how that submission meets the qualifications. So you can see they say that it will go through all of these features, whether, the quality of the ethics, declarations, all of this kind of stuff. So that is one tool. I'm just scrolling up. You can see these are some of the bodies or companies that are using this tool. The next one that we've heard of a lot is Stat Reviewer, and this is automated statistical reports. So what this system does is it will run manuscripts against these common statistical reporting guidelines, and then, will let you know how compliant it is with that guideline. Right. The next one, this one's very interesting. This one, this is not the greatest website, but what this one does, it does unsupervised concept extraction. What that means is that it will go through a huge amount of research articles, and it will tell you things like suggest related content. We do know also that Springer Nature has been using this. And another thing that they've been using it for is using this concept extraction, to suggest peer reviewers. So they'll look for, authors with this that have been writing, say, on this concept that it's using, and then we'll suggest a group of peer reviewers that can then be automatically reached out to for reviewing specific papers and things like that. The last one that I want to show is called Elicit. This one, it's a AI research assistant. So it has a large corpus of scholarly journal articles that it accesses. And it essentially, the main function that this does is suggests other research articles. This one, I am aware of some librarians that have been sort of testing it out. And apparently it's not great, but it does offer some things. And definitely these tools are things that people are probably using, whether we're aware of it or not. But those are a few of the tools that I wanted to highlight. And I think one of the things people are most commonly using tools like Elicit and like ChatGPT for is for creating, like summaries when they're creating lit reviews and stuff like that. You can put a document into it and then it will generate, a short summary. So just something to be aware of. Okay, so what about AI detection? There are quite a few plagiarism checkers that have AI detection. We know Grammarly's plagiarism detection already does, and a lot of the other big plagiarism detection platforms are developing them, so they will be being released shortly. Another one that I wanted to point out is GPT-0, and this is, you know, kind of one of these freemium models where it's free to use to a point, and then if you want to use it more, you have to pay. But essentially, what this allows you to do is to just copy and paste text into this text box, or you can upload a file, and then it will let you know the probability that this text was generated by AI or by a person. So this is the tool we hear about being used most in the scholarly publishing world. And the basic functions are free, so I did like to point that out. All right. Before we go to questions and have some discussion, I just wanted to highlight a few more tips that we would recommend for detecting AI generated content. So, I mean, as Sarah and I have both mentioned, AI is just bringing together existing text. It's not something that's generating new ideas. So that's, if you are critically reading through something with an eye to that, that can be a giveaway. Some AI tools will even mention themselves in the write-up. So if you read carefully, you may see like a note at the end, or it'll say, I'm a, you know, AI platform and I don't have an opinion on this. The other thing is checking citations can be a really good, easy way to detect these things, because it doesn't seem to have the best comprehensive, like, understanding. These tools don't seem to have the best understanding of a citation. And so they're often generating, you know, very plausible looking citations, but that are actually fake. So checking the citations can be a good, quick thing to do to see if the content that you're looking at has been AI generated, you know, seeing if those sources actually exist. So that is my whirlwind tour of some tools that are being used in scholarly publishing and some ways that you can use them. And so I'd like to put open to the floor, you know, any questions that people have, and maybe we can have some discussion. I think we'll probably stop recording for that part.